Good piece. Good piece. Interesting piece. Yeah. Why don't you? There was a lot of layers on that. Why don't you kind of set the context up that brings you to the point in your life where all these pieces start to transpire? What does that look like? I'm going to probably ask you about 3 or 4 questions. Then I'm going to get out of the way. These men and women read the book, and they can ask some really exciting questions. So why don't you just kind of set it up for us?
You want me to set up the part about the hospital?
No,
and
set up the part about how a young woman comes to that place.
No guidance. I didn't have any kind of guidance growing up. I probably was 12 years old. My mother would work. Both my brothers were grown and out of the house. And I would get out of school, come home. My mother would come home about 8:30 at night, take a bath, and go straight to sleep. So there was no, Sonya, do this, or, how was your day, Sonya? I don't think my mother and I ever had been out to dinner, sat down and had a talk, anything, throughout most of my life, probably until I was 32. So there was no guidance in my life. I pretty much raised myself from 12 on up, and I got into the military at 17, and you're around a lot of drinking and partying, and that's the kind of lifestyle I fell into at 17 on my own.
So that's how it's set up. But then what spun it out of control? What are some of the elements that spun it out of control?
Number one is probably my temperament. I had a bad temper back then. I'd fight all the time, didn't mind if it was a man or woman, a group, it didn't matter. I didn't know how to control my anger or why I was so angry all the time. I was angry all the time. Number two is probably drinking. I drank a lot back then. Just beer, but I drank lots and lots of beer. So, and number three is no maturity. No maturity, going from 12 with no guidance, 17 on your own, and placing people in my life that were partiers and fighters and liked to drink. They smoked a lot of weed, and you fall into that group. And these are the people you're surrounded with. They're the ones showing you love for the first time in your life, you think. So you become more like them. And those are the people you kind of mirror yourself after. So it started probably about 16, 17, and it went on. And then I had my oldest child at 21, and I had no foundation. So even I was with her father for 4 years. I just up and left one day, no job, nowhere to go really, just up and left and start over and end up pregnant again, and it just goes out of control. When you have no foundation, nowhere to start, you just spiral everywhere. You ricochet off of things, and that's what I was doing, just ricocheting from place to place. I think I tell people I've been on my own since I was 17, but really I was on my own, then I lived with Stacy. Then I was on my own, then I lived with Stacy. Then I was on my own, and I lived with a friend. And then I lived with another friend, and I lived with another friend.
And so when did that happen? So at 12, you and your mother kind of had a disconnected relationship. Not kind of, had a disconnected relationship.
Correct.
But then you start bouncing around kind of from family to family, house to house.
Correct.
And so what was that like for you in terms of trying to intellectually process your value?
I didn't care. I mean, there was nothing intellectual there. I didn't care. As long as I had somewhere to sleep, and I can't even tell you, I was in the military. I didn't even take my job seriously. There were so many times they should have put me out that they didn't. They held on to me. They gave me chance after chance, but I really didn't care. I didn't see tomorrow. I was just living for the moment, and the moment was always fun. So there was no guidance.
Last question, and I just find it real intriguing. What was the moment, and I know you're going to get into some of this when you get into the Q&A piece, but what was the moment that started to shift it for you, turn it around in terms of your life?
All right, for those of you who have read the book, you've read a lot about me, but the part that really turned it around for life for me is not in my book. It's not in the first book. It's in the second book, so this is a little bit of a spoiler. But I was living in Colorado. I had a roommate, and she was a partier, and her whole family, they were all boosters, and I didn't care. You know, my boyfriend was a drug dealer. I didn't
When you
care.
say booster, what is that?
They would go into stores, and you could tell them, I want a washer and dryer, and they can go get it. Yeah. And come out with a washer and dryer, sell it to you for like $200. So they could still.
I got family members like that. That's why I wanted some clarity on so I know what that.
That's how they made their living. That's how they made their living. So they would just go into a store, you tell them what you wanted, and they could get it. Well, one night, my boyfriend didn't stay the night, her boyfriend didn't stay the night. I go to sleep, and I wake up to somebody kicking in my door. A guy comes to my bedroom door. He asked me where my wallet was. I had no money, but I told him where my wallet was. He gets my wallet. He didn't look in it, and he put a pillow over my head. Told me to lay down. I asked about my child. I only had one at the time, and I asked about my child. He said the girls were okay, so he knew there were 2 kids in the house. And I laid down. I didn't fuss. I didn't fight. I just laid down, and he fired 2 shots into the pillow. And he ran out. Well, thank goodness I wasn't shot, but there were 2 shots fired directly into the pillow. And for me, I was gone within 48 hours. And I had lost so much faith through the years. But that was when I started trying to turn my life around for the better. I mean, really, really, I had already given up my son for adoption, but I didn't have my little one. So that was the point I was thinking, or I knew I would never choose the kind of lifestyle I had been living. And believe it or not, I was just so grateful once I got out of that lifestyle to be able to start over. I never even told anybody about the things I had been through, not even my ex-husband. Never ever mentioned to him about the adoption, the shooting, nothing. But that was my turning point.